All right, everyone, we're going to get started today for the Installation Guideline LPG webinar. Thanks for joining us. This is Stephanie from South Shore Clean Cities, and this is one of our Clean Cities Station Installation Guidelines for LPG webinar. We'll be giving an overview of the guidelines, processes, and experiences of installing an LPG station. These webinars are funded by the Lake Michigan Consortium Corridor Alternative Fuel Implementation Initiative, which is supported by the Department of Energy through the Clean Cities Implementation Initiative to Advance Alternative Fuel Markets program. Under these projects, local, public, and private partnerships are accelerating the deployment of alternative fuel vehicles and conducting public outreach and training in the communities across the country. Since 1993, the Energy Department's Clean Cities Initiative have supported community-led efforts to deploy vehicle and infrastructure technologies across a broad portfolio of alternative fuels, helping to reduce America's reliance on petroleum. The webinar will be recorded and made available after the session on the Clean Cities, South Shore Clean Cities, Wisconsin Clean Cities, and Chicago Area Clean Cities websites. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the question box, and we will get to them after the presentations are completed. With that being said, we have Ted Barnes from the Gas Technology Institute that will start off our presentation, and then we'll have Representatives Chad from Boehlke Bottled Gas, and then Jaime from AmeriGas Propane. So whenever you're ready, Ted, take it away.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you all for joining us. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is Ted Barnes. I work at the Gas Technology Institute. Just to give you a very brief history, GTI is a nonprofit research lab located near O'Hare Airport in the Chicago area. We've been doing research on clean energy and alternative fuels for around 70 years. Since the 1940s we began. And my role here is to set the table with some of the background info and some of the important codes and standards that need to be followed when installing a propane station. As I go through this here, I'll be calling on Chad Kroening and Jaime Mendez to give some of their experiences putting in stations locally. So the main objectives we're going to cover here are just talk about propane as a fuel, some of the codes and standards that apply, some of the basics of what a fueling station looks like, some of the separation distances and locating of the specific equipment, then go over the hazardous area classifications, the station, some guidelines on station installation, and then a brief mention of the potential of fire protection. So the basics of propane fuel is propane is a gas that's produced when natural gas is processed and crude oil is refined. When it comes from the ground, it is odorless, and odorant is typically added so that which greatly increases the safety of the fuel. It's a non-toxic, colorless gas. At atmospheric pressure and ambient temperature, it is a gas. When you get it in your home or in your vehicle or at a fueling station, it is stored as a liquid. And it is classified as a Class 1A flammable liquid. The vapors of propane are heavier than air, and that drives some of the safety regulations and where flame and electrical hazards need to be placed. So typically, surface pressure of a propane fuel system is in the area of 200 to 300 psi. At this pressure, propane will be in a liquid of temperatures up to about 120 degrees F. By code, propane fuel tanks are allowed to be filled to roughly 80% of the volume. This is a kind of a safety to make sure that you never get to an unsafe situation on your fueling tank. And during fueling, the fueling is typically stopped by the auto stop fill valve that's installed on your vehicle, or it can be manually stopped by the operator at the dispenser. At this point, I wanted to ask Chad first here about his experiences, just kind of the end user experience with propane fueling, And then also, Chad, if you could talk to public versus private fueling and how you've seen that applied, or more attendant versus, for public fueling, I guess.
Sure. I guess I've looked at it, or I've installed private dispensers, not so much public. And
okay, and have you been in a situation where drivers fill themselves, or is it typical that attendants fill from the private locations?
yeah, I've been having, one of my accounts is definitely a driver filled, not a tenant filled, but the other is both.
Okay. And Jaime, do you have experience in some, or can you describe some of the fueling basics or the end user experience?
So we basically, most of our accounts that we have going now are not especially our driver fill, and what we do is we train each individual driver. If the company has a high turnover rate, then we have a program called Train the Trainer, which means we'll basically train like the head engineer or one of the managers there, or a couple of them, and then they can just train their new employees as we go. And we just maintain a yearly training program to make sure they're all up to date on safety, the what not to do, and the what to do in case this happens or that happens. So, so far, I mean, we've had customers doing the program for over a couple of years now, and we've had no issues, and they love it. I mean, they like being able to fill up their own tanks and not waiting for a dispatcher to come over and fill them up. So they just come in, fill up, and go. So
great, thank you. So the main codes and standards to follow when installing a propane station, or if you're looking for a site to potentially place a propane station, the NFPA 58 is the code that is most often applied. It's the most detailed to vehicle fueling specifically. NFPA 70, the National Electric Code, covers the hazard locations and the type of equipment that can be placed in those locations. NFPA 30A comes in place if you have a multi-fuel station, so if you have typical gasoline or diesel located at the same site that you have a propane station. And then in some jurisdictions, the International Fire Code comes into play. Just a note here that Chapter 22, which covers many of the alt fuels, is not recognized in Wisconsin specifically. This is an area where the main thing to know is that you need to talk to your local code official or fire marshal to find out what codes apply there, and talk over with them your design plans and how to work. And Chad, could you chime in with some of your experiences with code officials up in the Wisconsin area where you put in stations?
Sure. Having experience putting 3 in so far in Wisconsin, we've worked with the state of Wisconsin plus any local jurisdictions. Local jurisdictions seem to be way more interested in having you work with the state. The state itself is very receptive to doing alt fuels, but in the same token, there's a lot of questions and a lot of question and answer that goes on with that. As long as you're forthright with them and you all deal together and make sure that if you have questions, they'll help you work through them, or you can help them work through them in some cases, and that'll oftentimes alleviate a lot of the problems in the long run.
Great. And Jaime, do you have anything to add on code standards or code officials, fire marshals?
yeah, it's almost a little bit the other way around out here in Illinois. State, we have a very good relationship with the local state fire marshals here, and they're pretty much, they pretty much, like I said, as long as you're going by NFPA 58, everything's good to go. It's at the local level where you have to be a little bit more involved and go talk to the aldermen or the local fire marshals and just explain to them what's going on. A lot of them aren't well versed on the whole propane application, so they're kind of hesitant to want to approve any type of dispenser. In most cases, I can't even put an actual tank in some towns, and some want specifically underground tanks. So that's where that's where I come in as an account manager, and I pretty much contact any kind of local city or town rep, and then work my way down the chain, to whoever I need to talk to get anything approved. So.
Great. Thank you. So to go over the basics of what a station looks like, first is the storage tank, which is probably most familiar to everybody. Those are similar to the ones that are outside of houses and or larger commercial buildings as well. Then you have a pump that pumps the LPG to the dispenser. Dispenser is similar to a gasoline or diesel dispenser. Then sometimes you'll have a card reader for authorizing transactions. It can be in a dispenser or separated from a dispenser often, or sometimes it's just a keypad to authorize access if it's private fueling. One thing to remember and verify is the storage is rated and approved by ASME, and then NFPA 58 covers a lot of the pump metering and dispenser devices. I have a couple images here from some Boehlke gas installations in Wisconsin. Chad, if you want to kind of talk about this, maybe talk about sizing of stations and how you suggest that and how these went in. And if you could go into some little detail of what the components are that we're looking at here, I'll try to point at them with my mouse.
Sure. Well, let's start out with what we've got here. This is two 2,000-gallon propane tanks, manifolded together. A little hard to see, but right behind the yellow sign there is your pump. This is a high differential system. These people run all Roush vehicles, so they need the high differential pumps. Top right, kind of, with the Boehlke gas sticker in the back there, that's your card reader. And that is out of the Class 1 electrical range. And then your dispenser is closer here. That's a CFT. And then this has a longer hose on it. I think we've got 30 feet on there. So we went for a variance to the village because of what they're fueling, different size vehicles, buses, vans, all that. I guess one of the things to think about when you're just sizing a dispenser is that future is more important than what you're doing right now. If there's possibilities of way more fuel being used in the future, it's very much important to make sure to go ahead and make sure the dispenser is big enough up front. I would say that you want to have that end number in sight for each location you do, and then again how you're going to be able to get by and have the gas delivered to you. One thing I would add would go with this and kind of what we were talking about before with the code officials. Depending on municipalities and that, staying within certain guidelines like the under 4,000 or under 2,000 gallon tank sizing is very important, because you don't have to go get conditional approval. That is one thing that a lot of municipalities end up being the hang up on.
Chad, I also have an image of a skid-mounted version here if you want to kind of show people about another.
Yeah, and this is basically the same thing as what you saw in the other picture. This has a 1,000-gallon propane tank on. It's a little easier to see the pump there behind the cabinet, but then inside this cabinet is a hose and a meter. This is a mechanical meter. This is non-electronic. This is kind of more bare bones. Somebody who thinks they're not going to, have to keep track of gas for different types of applications with different types of taxes. This one here is at a police department, and I guess what I would say about that is it's a key lock system. and it's also in a situation where it's in a small yard, so there's not a whole lot of. You couldn't put a bigger tank in there if you tried. I can give you a couple more insights on this one because it's a little easier to see. A couple of the safety components that are on there are an internal valve, which is right on the bottom of the tank. This one is set up to operate on a nitrogen system. So as soon as they flip the switch on, that main valve opens, it waits 15 seconds, kicks the pump in. And then if you go up top on the tank, that is your bypass return, and that has a steel back check in it, so if something were to shear off, that's inside the tank. This is one solid skid mount, so there's not really a need to have flex lines, but we do put them in anyways.
Thank you very much. And Jaime, I believe you have some images of your installations for when you go through your slides, so you can go through it then if you like.
Yep, sounds good. They're pretty much the same basic install, same safety features. Your typical tear off at the hose in case the driver does pull away with the hose connected. That'll tear off and shut off any fuel from coming out of the dispenser. All you'll have is just the couple gallons that are stuck in that hose. We have the new fuel nozzles actually will not release propane unless you have a complete connection to the filler valve. So that's another nice safety feature. You can't hold the gun up in the air and squeeze the nozzle. It will not release any product either. So Boehlke has done a real good job of adding some extra safety features to these nozzles.
Great. And next thing to talk about is when siting a station, there are a lot of regulations and separation distances included in NFPA 58. Covers pumps, storage, dispensing equipment. The location, either indoors or outdoors, the separations distance vary. Most of the things we're discussing are for vehicles, and those are typically outside in the past, and still many lift truck applications can be indoors, but those are done outdoors as well. So there are different separation distance that apply for different locations. The distances that I'll show on the next slide here are all considered for outdoors. And then 30A starts to apply if you have multiple fuels at one location. So if you have to have different separation distances from above ground diesel tanks or above ground dispensers. What this slide here shows a template or a schematic of a generic propane station. These distances are, for an example, of a 2,000-gallon propane tank. I won't go through all of the different separation distances. This is really meant as a reference if you want to give a quick look to a site. Some of the general ones are 10 feet from public streets and roads, and 25 feet for points of transfer. That's from the point of transfer of the fuel to a railroad, 25 feet to a property line. And these vary by the size of your tank, and they also can be mitigated through engineering safeties or discussions with your local fire official. The other part that comes into NFPA 58 about equipment and locating certain components is in NFPA 58 for electrical hazardous area locations. So those are areas where you need to keep electric hazards out of. If there are components in those areas, they have to be made so that they are allowed within a Class 1 Div 1 area or a Class 1 Div 2 area. Sometimes you'll need explosion-proof components. Sometimes people use intrinsically safe components. That's part of the wiring and conduit work, and it's a very large topic that could have a whole nother presentation. But electricians that are aware and have worked on fueling stations in the past have a very good feel for where seal-offs need to be put, what equipment can be located in what areas. This schematic here shows your electric hazardous locations. It's, once again, just kind of a schematic of a generic station. The areas in yellow are the Class 1 Div 2 areas. Those are areas where it is supposed that gas could be present at some point, but not typically present. The areas in red, which are much smaller, typically inside the dispenser, and 18 inches around the dispenser, up to 4 feet above the base of the dispenser, are Class 1 Div 1 areas. Those are locations where it's more likely gas will be present, and you typically need explosion-proof devices or devices with no arcing and sparking possibility. The notes on the side here cover the other distances. It's 15 feet from a storage tank, 15 feet from a pump, 20 feet from a dispenser. That's 18 inches above grade, extending 20 feet, only 18 inches above grade. Chad, and then Jaime, do you have anything you want to add about specific issues you've had, or questions, or something that comes up, or things that are located that cause issues for separation distances?
One of the things to keep in mind with separation distance is always that minimums are nice, and sometimes it's nice to hug stuff up against things, but every site has to be its own deal, because depending on what you're using for auto gas, setbacks need to be thought about when you're trying to figure out how to get your 45-foot school bus in there as well. So totally doesn't apply to the code, but if you're looking at putting a dispenser in, that's important. One other thing I would probably bring up is in that picture we showed before with the 2,000 gallon tanks, that again had the card reader. One more back, yep. That one there has your card reader outside of the classified area because it's more than 4 feet off the ground and more than 5 feet from any point of exchange. So I guess that's what I have to add on the electrical part and setbacks. I saw somebody ask a question about steel barriers and crash protection. I was going to mention that earlier. Crash protection is required. You can actually in this picture see a yellow bollard right below. But crash protection is required by NFPA 58. What type of crash protection is not specified. You can use steel post, steel barrier. You can use concrete bollards. You can use concrete block. You can use curbs. It just says you have to be able to mitigate the crash. So.
Jaime, do you have anything you want to add now, or?
Nope, just out of Illinois, if you do use crash bollards, we always try to use a 4x4x4 rule, so it's like 4 foot high, 4 foot deep, and 4 feet apart. Like you said, like Chad mentioned, if you want to always keep in mind the future. If you plan on adding fleet, you're going to go through more fuel, especially if you are, doing a concrete pad and cement bollards. Those aren't easy to move around, or I think it even is possible. So you want to always make sure if you are going to expand or upgrade equipment, you want to leave room for expansion there. So that's it.
So some of these points hit things that we've already discussed, but above ground tanks, horizontal tanks, ASME tanks typically, are supported by the steel structures as we've shown, and they often have slotted and the design to allow for expansion and contraction, so there's no binding in the tanks. The tanks are required to be installed on concrete or masonry foundations. This is as we were discussing, you want to kind of plan those out ahead of time. If you want expansion, it's nice to be able to pour a pad, size that you'd want in the future. For containers 2,000 gallons or less, the pump can be mounted on a common base, assuming the bottom of the container meets the dimensions. And as we just discussed, tanks are to be physically protected. Bollards, guardrails, curbs, things like that. As far as piping, typical piping that's used ranges from 3/4 of an inch to 2 inches, depending on the flow rates and dispenser design and the type of fueling. Metallic piping and fittings are fabricated, installed, and tested per ASME B31.3. Most mechanical contractors are very aware of this, but it's something to keep in mind if you haven't experienced this type of fueling before. If you want a lot of detail, there's pressure ratings defined in NFPA 58. In section 6.9.3.3, there's significant detail, very large tables going over this. Also, pipe joints are permitted to be threaded, flanged, welded, or brazed. It gives you some options. Jaime and Chad, well, let me finish up on piping here, and then I'll let you guys chime in on what you guys have typically done. And then if the systems that we've shown you so far, the dispenser has been located basically on skid or very close to the tanks. If the piping does need to be buried, the minimum cover depth is 12 inches, it could be 18 inches or greater. And then buried, something you have to remember there is that buried metal pipe must be protected against corrosion. So if you have black pipe in contact with earth, you need some kind of cathodic protection in order to protect yourself against corrosion that does occur on metal to earth connections. Chad and Jaime, do you have anything specific on piping or issues you guys have seen in the past?
The one thing I would probably say is most dispensers are usually either threaded or flanged type of piping, mostly for maintenance types of deals. These are not huge installations in a lot of cases. If you're dealing with installations of auto gas where you're using large, like 12, 18, 30,000 gallon tanks, I could see welded, but then you have to have a certified welder. And fixing pumps. Pumps are mostly flanged now. Some are still threaded, but most of the high differential stuff is flanged. Makes it very easy to do any type of maintenance on that. So I guess that's all I would say about that part.
Jaime, do you have anything to add at this time?
You also want to keep in mind also if you're going to run, with a lot of auto gas dispensers, we are also adding the Blue Moon filter system, which is, it really cleans up that fuel for that engine. I know there's going to be some changes to that Blue Moon filter, I believe. So I believe the size of pipe might take a part in that too, as we get to that. But you want to make sure the flow of the propane from the tank through that filter and onto the dispenser. You want to make sure it's good enough so you're not waiting there and waiting a half hour to fill up a tank. So.
Next component is a dispenser. Dispenser needs to be a listed device per NFPA 30A. Dispensers installed under a canopy should have at least 50% of their perimeter open to the outdoors to meet all the outdoor regulations. Protection against trespassing, tampering should be installed. As you saw, a fence around a station is often typical. And similar to the tanks, the dispenser should be installed on a concrete foundation. As you've seen, it's often mounted on the same base as the storage tank. The hose length, 18 feet is your typical max length. As Chad mentioned, you can get variances in specific areas. A breakaway device is always installed. That's specific to a vehicle drive away, just as there is at a gasoline station. if someone drives away with that hose, it shuts off flow. Also, there's a switch or circuit breaker that installed 20 to 100 feet from the dispenser in order to shut power down, and there needs to be signage to that point as well. And some general notes on station installations. There's an excess flow valve or differential back pressure valve should be installed where a propane hose is connected to liquid piping. Hydrostatic relief valves should be installed to isolating shutoff valves. Propane tank opening should be equipped with either an internal valve fitted for remote closure, so something that can have an automatic shutoff using thermal actuation, or a positive shutoff valve located that will shut down on excess flow and when an ESD or a remotely actuated emergency button has been pressed. More on the ESD device, which typically are the big red button you see at a fueling station sometimes. Those should be located between 3 and 100 feet from where you're doing your fueling. Remember, a station has 2 liquid transfer points too. There's one where you fill the stationary vessel at the station, and also the dispenser fueling the vehicle. Actuated emergency shutoff and internal valves should be tested annually. Manual shutoff valve and excess flow valve shall be located in a liquid line between the pump and the dispenser when the dispenser is at a remote location. So when the dispenser is separated from your large storage vessel, there's a need for an excess flow valve. And that's in the rare event that a dispenser gets dislodged from its base or something similar to that. An excess flow valve will know that there's been a major issue, and it'll shut down flow of the gas, which would, it's a critical safety. And then the last point is in bold here, just to let you know that typically all of these safety devices and relief valves and excess flow valves and such, those are either included in the equipment design or the station design has this. So if you're an end user, or if you are looking at putting in a station, this is the kind of feature that you shouldn't need to look at yourself. You should, experienced professionals and your code officials will go over these features and make sure everything is included. Here, once again, is a schematic to show you some of these main points. One thing here, you have this valve here. If you read the notes, it references the ESD auto valve. So if an emergency shutdown button is pushed, a valve here will close, which will stop flow to the dispenser and stop flow leaving the storage tank. Here is where, an excess flow valve, this sometimes is actually placed down in the base of, in the pit below the dispenser. The breakaway device that we've discussed a couple times is located typically here, at where the hose connects to the dispenser. So once again, Chad, do you have anything to mention on different safety devices that we haven't already mentioned before, or ESDs, or?
I would think that you guys mentioned all of them. I would say one thing, to reassure the end user is that, especially in the state of Wisconsin, anytime you do a site plan, which is required for any auto gas installation in Wisconsin, they're very thorough on parts and where inline parts are, hydrostatic relief valves, excess flows, internals. The only other thing I'd say is I think, and I guess I should probably have better information on this, but I think anything over 4,000 gallons, you now need to have an internal self-closing valve on for the code, NFPA 58, since 2011. Other than that, I would agree that all the safety stuff is something that's done by the builder, not the end user, not something that has to be worried about after the fact.
Jaime, do you have any specific thing to add here?
No, not really. It's all pretty much touched there.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of these because it's key in everyone's mind for sure. There was a question from one of the attendees about EPA and OSHA risk management and safety process plans at some threshold. I'm assuming that's some threshold of storage size. This slide points to that a little bit for fire protection, which is a little different. Well, there may be some overlap, but at a certain size, there is fire protection required. That can be sometimes sprinkler systems, or for very, very large stations, there's other berms and water cannons and things like that. It's not typically seen at a auto gas fueling station because those tanks are often in the 4,000 gallon and below. Also, if required, a fire safety analysis should be submitted to the code official at a certain size, and NFPA has a fire safety analysis manual for propane gas storage facilities that can always be referenced and used as guidance. Chad or Jaime, have you come across any of the EPA or OSHA risk management or safety processes for certain size propane installations?
I haven't seen any that are required. I mean, I've seen some after the fact type of OSHA things come up, but I haven't seen any types of risk management or safety plans up front that are required by either of those. I mean, OSHA's the kind of thing that's usually they do require a lot of different plans and whatnot for a lot of things, but everything I've seen for propane auto gas has been an after the fact type of thing with them.
And we basically apply the same OSHA kind of safety standards that we would do on our regular dispensers in general, like our wholesale resellers. So as long as we have documentation that we have done the safety training, explain the proper procedures on how to handle most situations and scenarios, OSHA and local fire marshals are pretty much okay with that, and they see our training material, and they're pretty much okay with any of that. So.
And one thing also I'll add is when doing alt fuel stations or any kind of fueling station, often a local fire marshal will require or suggest an emergency action plan, and it's something that should be done even if it's not required, but these often entail first responder shutdowns and a basic diagram of the system, people to call, things such as that, a general safety plan.
Yeah, Ted, I think that in Wisconsin, the threshold on that, on the emergency action plans, or what do they call it now, Tier 2 or something, through the state, the threshold on that, I believe, is 4,000 gallons still.
All right.
However, if you have it in conjunction with other fuels, then it's less.
Well, my last slide here is there's a lot of good references about general information on propane auto gas. The Alt Fuel Data Center is a Department of Energy website that has information on all alt fuels. Always Your Local Clean Cities Coordinator has a lot of information and can put you in touch with people. PERC, the Propane Education Research Council, has a couple good websites. The Autogas USA is specific to autogas and has a lot of background information on even maintenance facilities and garages and other type information. The National Propane Gas Association, and then of course your local equipment providers have a lot of experience with this and can answer many of your questions there. Last slide is the acknowledgement of support from the Department of Energy, and and some disclaimers as well. So that's all I have, and of course also you'll contact GTI or myself, and you can get in touch with me, through Stephanie or Clean Cities for sure. But I'll pass it on over to Jaime now. He's got a presentation to go through as well, and then hopefully we have some time for questions, though we have been going through them as they've come in.
All right, thank
you.
Well, Stephanie will be showing my slide presentation. I'm having some computer issues on my end. I couldn't log on through the webinar. Stephanie?
Your slides are up.
Okay, beautiful. So again, we're AmeriGas Propane. We cover all 50 states, have a pretty big footprint, and we're having some really good success out here with auto gas, as most other propane companies are. Chicago in particular has, we are now on our 4th or 5th fleet that is running on auto gas, and we've had nothing but good stories. Even with this little propane pricing blip we fell into this winter, they're still happy with the product. They know that there's a lot of flexibility with it, and that they do have options of bucking in fuel and all that other good stuff that you really you can't do with gasoline. They like the safety part of it. That's, I think, like any other propane company, that's one of our #1 objectives, is to be safe. We wouldn't cut any corners on any kind of install, just because safety is our #1 priority overall. Even more than making money on selling the product, I want to make sure that both me and the customers can sleep at night. So we do make sure that it's all done properly and safely. If you go to the #2 slide, Stephanie, you'll see again propane auto gas, clean burning. We all know that. Readily available. Even with this little propane shortage we were going through, we were able to transport fuel from Texas, California, and Florida. So we were never really in any kind of real danger of running out of propane. We were able to get it from somewhere. It wasn't cheap, but we were able to get it. So that's one thing that our customers did not worry about, was running out of fuel, and especially customers like Roush customers, where they run strictly dedicated propane vehicles. They had no fear about running out and not being able to move their fleet around. We are the 3rd most commonly used motor fuel. In Europe, it's real big. We have almost 300,000 vehicles in the U.S. Slideshow #3 kind of explains the same process of what we were told, how it comes from and how it's shipped from all sorts of different parts of the country, and also from like Canada, and just the different process of it. Slide #4. We're back. Propane is being priced back at the around $2 range. Again, the more you buy, the less you pay. So the bigger the fleet, you're going to get a bigger savings and a bigger return on investment on your conversions and whatever you do invest in converting your vehicles over. What else do we have here? It's priced differently. We are a commodity, but we're not as volatile usually, other than this year's exception. But we do go up with market. So we are a commodity, so we do fluctuate throughout the season. So higher demand creates a higher price. Winter usually spikes up the cost of fuel. It's used for heating homes and just most homes that run their water boilers, stoves, and just their home appliances require more propane in the winter, so that's what spikes up the price. There was a 50-cent a gallon refundable tax credit. I believe that's still on the table. It hasn't been voted on yet, so we're hoping that will pass through. Illinois still has a $4,000 rebate in plan for conversions. So you get 80% of the conversion per vehicle up to $4,000. If you go to slide #5, Stephanie, you can see a couple of our dispensers. The one on the left is it's a cabinet dispenser. So that's probably in a municipality where they also fill up canisters. What we're doing now with like Cook County Forest Preserve, they are running their lawnmowers on propane. So those use 33-pound tanks, which are filled in the cabinet, because anytime you fill a cylinder on site, it has to be filled per scale, per weight. So that's what that is for. And again, we have our fire extinguishers a couple feet away from the dispenser, one in the dispenser. Plus you have all your manual shutoffs at the cabinet and also on the building, which is it's got to be at least 25 feet away. Then we have another bigger size dispenser for a school bus company. That has a fuel management system and all the nice little bells and whistles they like to use to monitor the fuel and like the emissions on the bus. Those fuel management systems are pricey, but I mean, it could go anywhere from a real basic stripped-down version of it to a Cadillac, which it runs diagnostics and tells you what how much fuel is burning, what rate, and it's a real nice system. If you go to the slide number 6, again, auto gas station installed on site at fleet base. So for a basic installation, the footprint of one of our dispensers pretty much takes anywhere from 1 to 2 parking spots. So they're not very invasive as far as taking up a lot of space. We do bump into these issues where maybe the fleet's not that big and the yard's not that big, so then we need to figure out, and that's where we all come in hand and try to get a nice customized system for you guys so that, 1, you have enough product to fill your needs, and 2, we provide the right size so we don't upsell you or we don't downsell you either, because we don't want you to be running out every couple of days because you don't have a big enough tank. They're all spoke-free dispensers, fully scalable to serve fleets of all sizes. Again, we could go anywhere from a 500-gallon tank up to 4,000-gallon tank or even 18,000-gallon tanks if the fleet is big enough. See here, installation time. It takes 1 to 2 days to install the system, but the permitting process is what takes longer. Usually by the time I go out to run a site survey, take measurements, submit the application to the state fire marshal, that takes 1 to 3 weeks for me to hear back from the state saying yay or nay. They contact the local fire department, which at that time I had already contacted them anyway to give them the heads up of what's going on. So usually it takes anywhere from 1 to 2 months to be fully ready to go and install the system. It also takes about 4 weeks to have the dispenser built and delivered to us, and then once we get it, we're pretty much good to go and set up the dispenser at the location. If you go to slide 7, there's a couple of examples of fuel management systems. Big ones out there are Gas Boy and Fuel Master. We don't particularly sell or offer Fuel Master, but we do have we are in contact with both reps and have a real good relationship with both companies, and we work together to make sure we get you the right Fuel Master system that you need. Again, we don't want to upsell you or undersell you, so we want to make sure you have exactly what you want in a fuel management system and then provide that service for you. We go to the next slide. AmeriGas does provide, most times we supply the dispenser at no extra charge, as long as you're buying product from us. So that means that since it is our dispenser, we are responsible for it. So we maintain periodical maintenance on it. Every time we go out to fill that dispenser, we make leak checks, check pressures on our gauges, our dispensers, so we make sure it's running tip-top shape. And also, if you do fall into any issues with it, you make one phone call to me, and I make sure that dispenser gets fixed or everything gets resolved. Sometimes when you own your own dispenser, you have to find somebody that's certified to work on it, and same thing goes for like plumbing issues or leaks. Again, you go back to needing somebody that's certified to handle propane. So we alleviate that headache when you just call, use one point of contact, and makes it easier for you guys all together. If you go to the next slide, there's a basic couple of different conversions that are available. There's 5 fuel systems that run both propane and gasoline. And again, these are, since they are all EPA certified, you do qualify for the $4,000 rebate. So if your basic system costs $5,500, your out-of-pocket kind of ends up just being $1,500. On slide 11, these are the more dedicated systems like Roush. Same thing, qualify for the $4,000 rebate, which is a nice program out here in Illinois. And all systems that are EPA certified do not void any warranties on any other vehicle. So if you have a brand new vehicle, you don't have to be afraid of voiding any type of warranty on it. They are all covered. If you want to go to slide 12, Stephanie. Again, it says, since it is a cleaner burning fuel, it does really clean out those deposits in the heads and in the combustion chambers. So you do have an increased time between maintenance intervals. You could take that vehicle to any other shop. You can go to a Merlin's or wherever you would go get your oil changes. They would not know the difference. You just make your basic maintenance stays the same, which is a nice something nice that doesn't always transfer to the other alternative fuels. If you go to slide 13, myths regarding propane vehicles versus other fuel vehicles. Storage tanks, like I said, as far as the dispenser, we can go as small as you need and as big as you need. It's not very space consuming. Same thing with the tanks on the vehicles. They pretty much they could hide under the chassis of the vehicle or in the trunk of a car where it doesn't really take up a lot of space. Again, depending on how many gallons you want to store. So my vehicle is a Ford Taurus. I have a 22 usable gallon tank in there, and it gives me the same driving range, a little bit more than my 16-gallon gasoline tank that's in the vehicle. Slide number 14. For public refueling, I am actually falling into that issue right now in Chicago. We have a customer that runs a limousine outfit, and they're trying to they actually bought some property to open up a public station to fuel gasoline, diesel, electric charging stations, propane stations, and CNG. There's still a little bit of we don't know what's going on, if you have to be trained to fill up your own vehicle or do we have to have attendants. That is our bump we're falling into right now. I'm working with the local and state fire marshals to figure out the best solution for that. Because once you do get to the private sector, are you going to have 10 cars waiting to get filled up by one gas attendant? So we're still kind of trying to figure out how that works out. Go to my slide 15. Consumer education and awareness. Need increased vehicles on the road. Inform customers regarding safety. Educate customers on the economics, and educate customers on the benefits to the U.S. And that's all. That's what I do when I go to your local, like I said, local fire marshals, local state reps, aldermen are probably the best way, the way that I've gotten more results quicker. If you go there and explain to them, hey, we're not going to blow up. It's very safe. We take safety very seriously. What can we do to make this process easier for both the customer and for the state or the town? And once you do that and tell them what the real facts are, and not just based off what they see on TV, and if you shoot a gas grill tank, it'll blow up a building. And once they're aware of all that, it makes the process a whole lot easier. And now that we have, like I said, 3 or 4 fleets out in the city, it's easier to say, hey, this is what's going on with them. Nothing's ever happened. They're very happy, very safe with it. And it just makes it a whole lot easier for us to get stuff approved. And that's all.
Jaime and Chad both, there was a question, well, there are 2 questions. I'll address the first one. One was about It was a great point about stormwater runoff issues. It raises the point about putting in alt fuel stations and which run into many construction issues. There are things besides just the alt fuel concerns that we've mentioned. There's things like you have to make sure if you're putting down a lot of concrete, for instance, that you meet your stormwater runoff concerns of the municipality. Also things like zoning. Sometimes you need to be careful of the zoning depending on where you are to change your location into a fueling station. Things like land use or remediation of land if you're digging in to the earth, or things like weights and measures for selling fuel if you're selling to the public. So there are many other topics. The other question was, could you guys give ballpark costs for different capacities? And you know, these questions are always difficult to answer because there's a lot of things that are specific to a location. But if you can just give people, you know, an idea. Chad, if you want to go first, if you're still on, and
yeah,
then
sure,
Jaime.
I'm still there. One of the things we do is every dispenser is a custom dispenser. We build them ourselves, and it's hard to give an exact price. One thing to tell you is you can build a dispenser for anywhere from a range of you know, $7,000 or $8,000 to $100,000. That being said, you know, basically card readers run somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 depending on what you're looking at. Dispensers themselves, if you're using a full-out dispenser like the CFT dispenser, which we saw earlier, or what was in the AmeriGas displays there, you know, you're looking at some money for that. If you need the data tracking and you need all the conveniences of the dispenser, you're probably going to spend in the neighborhood of $30,000. When I'm sure AmeriGas is much the same way as we are. Tank size or quantity of gas that you're going to have on site usually isn't really going to affect the price because whoever is putting in your dispenser is probably going to supply you with a tank. So if you buy a 1,000-gallon dispenser, tanks is what it is. Gas is going to cost what it's going to cost. You buy a 30,000-gallon tank, same situation. You know, we're probably going to cover costs of tanks, and gas will be about the same anyways. So price range-wise, I would say somewhere from $10,000. I would say your really nice dispenser with as much convenience as you need for a single hose fueling, probably looking around $30,000, $35,000, and that's with electronics. And then probably, you know, add $5,000, $6,000 per hose you want to add. That would be my basic outline for that. But everything here would be customized to what you're looking for. That's about all I have on that.
Yeah, same thing for us. And that we usually find that out the first day we meet. We try to figure out what your needs are, and then we kind of customize off of that. But pricing is right. It's right there. I mean, your basic dispenser is going to work from like, you know, $8 to $10,000. If you want to get fancy with electronics and other good stuff, that's about, you know, running up to $30,000. There are some really nice Cadillac type fuel management systems out there that I said, you know, like you said, they're $30,000 plus you have a monthly fee with the Fuel Master. So those could get pricey, but like I said, if you need it, if you want it, I mean, it's there at a cost. Usually AmeriGas tries to absorb the cost and provide the dispenser, even if it is the electronic type. We try to, if you sign a 3-year agreement with us, we'll pretty much provide the dispenser at no extra charge. It is AmeriGas property again, so it holds us liable and responsible for the equipment. So we make sure it's always running properly, and it falls into it. Propane pricing, we always try to just a rule. You know, we always try to say we're going to keep you as close to what half of the price of gasoline would be, which right now, as of today, I could say we're pretty close there. We're around the $2 range for propane, and we base it off of volume. So again, the more you buy, I have a quicker return on investment for the dispenser, which allows me to be more aggressive as far as pricing is concerned. So that's always that again is also very customizable according to what you need and what you're going to use as a consumer, and then from there I could give you a more accurate price. But I always try to say, you know, within the $2 range, to we're from $1.90 to $2.25 is my little range there, and then the more the merrier. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that's, unless we get more questions in, I think that's all from us. Stephanie, do you?
Hey, Ted?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Chad.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing. When we talked the other day, one of the things you asked me to speak about a little bit was what kind of feedback we get back from customers. What's the most often things they ask us? What's the most common stumbling blocks, or whatever you want to call it? And the one thing I'd bring up, and I would assume that AmeriGas would feel the same way, is the end user, the customer, is always most worried about safety. We, as Jaime said, training is done up front. Bigger accounts train the trainer, so they have somebody on site who can train rollover employees. And all those criteria are met. But that being said, some of these situations where you have, 30 to 50 vehicles, and you have, 50 to 150 different people filling fuel, the things people don't think about up front, and they come up, are the guy who fills his vehicle at 2 in the morning, and he smells the gas or the odorant from the gas on his clothes when he gets home, or on his glove that he left in his car next to the heater. So I mean, it's important to go over those things. It's important to educate them on how different safety aspects play out and how they linger and last more so beyond just fueling at the fueling dispenser. Personal protective equipment is always important, and then the other thing is how do you follow up on those things? For us, any safety event is a concern. If somebody calls us at 2 in the morning and says there's gas leaking, even though it may not be a gas leak, it may be something on a vehicle. It may be something that's in the air system that's on the building 50 feet away. They hear leaking or whatever the deal is. We still take that seriously, and everybody would in this industry, and that's something that gets checked out right away. So it's very important to go over these types of things with your end user, and then go over how to report these types of instances to make sure they get followed up on in the short term. And I would have to say that the biggest user we got is actually in the backyard of a fire department, and they've been very supportive to the whole situation. They've come over for training. We've trained them as well as the users, and everybody's been very happy with the system. So I would agree that autogas has its place, even in the big cities where they're worried about putting pressurized propane tanks. So I just wanted to add that per our conversation the other day, Ted.
No, thank you. A couple other questions have come through. The first was about installations for heavy-duty trucking applications. I think from our discussions, you guys, maybe school buses are probably about as big of a vehicle. The propane in general, about up to a 6.8 liter, is that about as large as is typically, or is certified for EPA or CARB? So yeah, maybe not the full heavy-duty long-haul trucks, but there are propane is used into, you know, the higher medium duty for sure.
I
Right.
have been told that almost anything gasoline is a go. Some companies will even invest in getting the EPA certification for that vehicle if it's not out there. Diesel is another beast that we're still trying to tackle, and I know I'm working with a couple companies that are really close to it. Right now, the only one that's kind of been working for some companies like long hauler or trucking companies is a Red Rooster system, which is pretty much 20% propane, 80% diesel, which reduces their cost. It also helps them when they're doing long hauls uphill. That propane gives them an extra little boost to make those hills. There's some companies that say they have a system that's like 80% propane, 20% diesel. They haven't got the EPA certification or even all the research and development part done for it, but they're really working on that, and we're keeping an eye on it. We're seeing how it goes or where it goes.
And on our end here, we haven't actually done any auto gas installations for anything like that. We do service some customers that use those same types of systems, that mostly referred to as a propane injection system. One of the things about them is there's question as to whether or not they can or will be EPA certified, because they're not actually part of the fuel system, because you're not putting propane into the fueling system of the engine. You're putting propane into the air intake of the engine. So I know that none of that stuff right now on the bigger diesels goes to any of these grants or anything that's out there because of the EPA certifications that are required. But yeah, we have dealt with customers the same way as Jaime was saying.
There's a question about what is the markup to keep on a price per gallon basis at I'm guessing this is at a public station. I don't know if you guys want to comment on that or.
I work with a couple of wholesale resale companies, and they pretty much just grab the margin that they're being charged and kind of just bump up from there. It's hard if you're going to do a wholesale retail application, you're almost better off kind of locking fuel. That way you can, if you lose track of it 1 week, then you might lose money that week. It gets a little tricky when it comes to the wholesale resale part of it. It doesn't work the same as if it were to be like one of our gas pro exchange programs. They have a flat fee all year round, and they leave their markup the same, so they don't have to worry about adjusting to the fluctuating cost of gas. So you would have to kind of almost go off of a U-Haul type scenario where they're a little high, but they can absorb most of the fluctuation of the market, and they still come out with some profit on top of it. But I mean, if you go to U-Haul, they're probably around $3.53 a gallon. I don't know if that'll fly with auto gas. So that's still something that we're trying to figure out and get to. Since we haven't been able to really set any type of public filling stations here, we haven't even reached the whole pricing point of it yet.
Yeah, as far as on my end, as far as pricing is concerned, I don't know that any of that's probably something that would be other than the basics of, you know, everybody makes money. That saves money to the consumer and makes money to the seller. I don't think that any type of specifics on that are probably appropriate for me.
All right. The final question is the question: any suggestions for beginning a career in the auto gas field? I'd like to start, you know, from saying on an auto mechanic side that there are certification courses for alt fuel. There's an ASE certification. You can get a NAFTC. Has certification for alt fuel vehicles. You know, as far as certifications or getting involved, you know, on the equipment side or the sales side or at the propane itself sales, I'll pass that on to Chad and Jaime.
I would say as far as in the propane end of the field, autogas is still a pretty new venture for, well, how about a reestablished venture for a lot of the propane companies. I mean, it's come and gone a couple times in the past, 10, 20 years ago. On this side, a lot of the careers that are there are probably going to be more driven, from our end retailer point, more driven to universal propane. I mean, autogas is still a very small portion of everybody's big piece of the pie, I would think at this time. I would even think AmeriGas has the same opinion on that. But that doesn't mean that there aren't companies and or corporations within the LP gas world that are dedicated to that. And if you're looking at just autogas, vehicle manufacturers, fuel system manufacturers, things like that, I would think there's stuff out there that's available.
What I've seen myself personally out here is a big demand for conversion companies. And companies like ICOM, American Alternative Fuels, Roush, I know they would love the opportunity to be able to have a local installer wherever you may be, because most of these are based out of Michigan or New York. So for them to come out to, currently we have a company that's coming out to Chicago and works for a week at a time and does conversions because they don't have a facility here. So that's where I see the need for it now, and not just specifically auto gas, but also CNG. And any type of alternative fuel outfitter, I think, would be a high demand right now as far as the big system companies that are looking for these installers. So.
Great, thank you very much. I think we've answered all the questions. We're 10, 15 minutes over. So please, you can always send in your questions to the Wisconsin's Clean Cities, to Stephanie or Erica, and we'll try to get answers back to you. But that will conclude our webinar, unless Stephanie wants to say goodbye to everybody.
No, that's okay. Thanks, Ed. I just want to let everybody know again that after the webinar tomorrow, when everybody receives their post email afterwards, they will receive the recording of the webinar, and the slides will be up on our websites as well. So if you have any questions, all of our contact information will be in that follow-up email, and so will the presenter's contact information in case you have any questions that you didn't get to ask during today's webinar. So thank you, everyone, for attending the Clean Cities Installation Guidelines for LPG webinar, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.